LUS1 and happy April. Joke of the day. What did the chicken say to the duck as it was about to cross the road? Don't do it, man. You'll never hear the end of it. Yeah, I don't write them. Okay, so two things for you today. So first off, a little bit of notes, kind of finishing the unit in the 1850s with slavery. So talking a little bit about secession, and also the Battle of Fort Sumter, which starts the Civil War. So you have that. And then second, we're going to start your independent research project, which is a Board of Ed requirement. So don't take this out on me. So for today, for your do now, is you have to come up with a topic. So for your topic, you're free to come up with anything that is American history related and US1 related going up to 1900. Okay. I just don't want a biography. And you should come up with a topic that is sort of controversial, where at least there's kind of multiple sides, multiple perspectives. That'll make it easier to come up with a thesis statement later. So we're going to do this in pieces. The topic you picked today is not the topic you're stuck with. You can change your mind at any point through the process. Just let me know you're changing your mind and shoot me an email with a new topic. But basically, we're going to do it in pieces, and each piece builds off of each other and culminating in a detailed outline that would work with a 3 to 5 page paper. So you're not writing the 3 to 5 page paper. Instead, the thought would be that this would be the final step before that. So you take the outline then would allow you to write that paper. So step one is your topic. Do the Friday we come back after break, you need to give me 3 sources in correct bibliographic form using the Chicago style. I've uploaded onto Classroom a style guide. There's also various guides. So if you go through the Lahman's website, you can get information that way. And then the due dates get fuzzy because I don't know if we'll be back in school, if we're not going to be back in school, that type of thing. So then kind of just looking at some due dates over here is that after that, you have your thesis statement will be due, as well as an annotated bibliography. And we'll talk more about that as we kind of go along. So that is due the week of April 27, sometime in that week. Again, I don't know when we're going to meet because I don't know in what format we'll be meeting. And then the final outline, which will count for 100 points, which is like the equivalent of a test grade, will be due the week of May 11th. Okay, so you have that. So that's kind of how this research project is going to work. We'll have check-ins throughout. You can email me questions as you have, as that come up with this. And then, so there's that. So other than that, enjoy the break. Stay safe and stay smart. And I'll see you guys on the other side. Have a good one. Hello. And so today we'll talk about secession and then the opening shots of the Civil War. So basically, as advertised, the South said if Abraham Lincoln wins the election of 1860, they will secede. They will leave the Union. So 4 days after the election, South Carolina, it's always South Carolina, calls for a state secessionist convention. And by Christmas, actually on Christmas Eve, they vote to leave the Union. Now, of course, Lincoln is not president yet. Buchanan is president. So everyone's kind of like waiting to see what is Buchanan going to do. And Buchanan decides to do nothing. It's his lame duck period. He decides to let Lincoln handle the situation, so he decides to do nothing. And so remember, Lincoln will not become president until March. So when South Carolina leaves the Union in December and there is no response from the federal government, that just emboldens more states to leave. So in the following 6 weeks after Christmas, 6 more states leave. So Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, the entire deep South all leaves. And they form their own government. And they call themselves the Confederate States of America, or the CSA. And as they leave the Union and form their own country, what they do is they confiscate anything that used to belong to the federal government within their state borders. So any federal property. So these are ships, this is money, supplies, weapons, armories, and also forts. And again, Buchanan does nothing. Now, in most of these situations, Military leadership, the vast majority of military leadership was Southern born. So the commanders of these forts simply just would lower the American flag and raise like the state flag of Texas. The one holdout um, was Fort Sumter in South Carolina. And Fort Sumter is a fort on an island located within Charleston Harbor. So it's completely, isolated out there in the middle of the harbor. It's commanded by Robert Anderson. Robert Anderson is from the North, so he's a Northerner. He believes that secession is illegal, it is unconstitutional, it is treason. And so Major Anderson refuses to surrender the fort to the state of South Carolina. Now, it is an undermanned fort. It only has 100 people. It's actually under construction. The construction isn't even finished yet at this point. Um, but he does his best to reinforce it with whatever troops he can find in the area and cannons and whatnot. Um, South Carolina wants the fort. And so what we have now is a standoff in which South Carolina lays siege to this fort. It's completely cut off. They're not going to allow any supplies, any fresh water, any food, medicine um, to get to the fort. And the thought is that eventually the fort will just starve and they will surrender. This puts Buchanan in a weird spot. Buchanan is president of the United States. He is commander in chief. These are soldiers that are saying they are loyal to him and not loyal to South Carolina. He's in a weird spot. So he has to do something. So he sends word that he decides basically that he will send a relief ship to help out the fort. Um, Word gets out that this is going to happen basically because he has Southerners within his cabinet. South Carolina knows the ship is coming. South Carolina shoots near the ship. The ship then turns around and sails away. And Buchanan's like, oh, well, I tried. It now becomes Lincoln's problem. So that you see there is an image of Fort Sumter. As you can see, it is completely isolated in the middle of Charleston Harbor. When Lincoln becomes president, he does decide to once again send a relief ship. The difference with Lincoln is that he advertises this. He says that the ship is going to be completely unarmed, no troops. The only thing on that ship is going to be food, medicine, um, and water. Food, water, and medical supplies. And he tells the South that this ship is coming. He tells you the name of the ship, when it's going to arrive, the direction it's coming from, the whole thing. No surprises. This, of course, puts the South in an interesting position. If they fire at the ship, a ship that everybody knows is an unarmed ship, they look kind of mean. If they don't fire the ship and the ship gets to the fort then gets resupplied, and those gentlemen, those soldiers can stay there forever. So what South Carolina decides to do is to shoot at the fort before the ship arrives. And the fort, being completely isolated, after 33 hours, eventually surrenders. Um, and this moment, you can see this image here, there is a red arrow there on your screen. That is where the first shot is fired. In the foreground is Fort Sumter. These shots, then, this picture is the interior of Fort Sumter, and that what you're looking at there is where they used to keep the ammunition. A couple of cannons hit there, explode, fort catches fire, and at that point, it's just a matter of time before you need to surrender. Once the fort does surrender, it kind of galvanizes, it fires up both sides of the country. The South sees this as a great victory. The North, of course, sees this as something of treason, something that needs to be avenged. So, what Lincoln does is Lincoln calls on states to enlist men for an army to fight rebellion. And this is important, right? Because armies, again, have two purposes, right? They're either you use them to attack or you use them to defend. And the South just wants to, in their opinion, they just want to be left alone. They have no intentions of attacking the North. They just want to break away and form their own country. So when Lincoln calls for an army, that sends the message to the South that Lincoln is looking to be the aggressor. And so by Lincoln calling for troops to the South, that to them is the beginnings of hostilities. Of course, the North, the beginning of hostility is when the South fired at the fort. Um, so the thing is now, though, these soldiers are going to have to march through some slave states. They're going to have to march through Maryland. They're going to have to march through Virginia, North Carolina to get to South Carolina. And so these states then have to decide, are they going to allow that to happen? And once Lincoln calls for more calls for troops, we have a second batch of southern states. We have Arkansas, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia who decide to leave, to secede, and to leave the Union. And once that occurs, you have Lincoln calling for troops. You have the South now calling to defend themselves. We now have a civil war. And just map wise, this is what we kind of look what it looks like. You have those orange states, those were the first states to leave. You have those green states, those were the states that were the second batch to leave. And then you have some of these states that are striped. Those are states that are slave states, but temporarily, at least for now, they're remaining loyal to the Union. So this is the background for the war. War has now happened. We have Southern soldiers firing at Northern soldiers, and now it is up to Lincoln to figure out how to put an end to this and to stop it.